On behalf of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement and the Women's Leadership Council, I'd like to welcome you. My name is Liz Pendergast, and I'm a proud member of the class of URI of 1984, and I'm a member of the Women's Leadership Council. I'm really honored to be part of the Women's Leadership Speaker Series, a program that showcases the inspiring careers of highly successful and influential women and provides the opportunity to share their knowledge and experiences with students and alumni. Today's program is the first in the series for this year, and I really want to thank you for joining us, and we hope you return for future speakers. I'd like to just take a moment to read the URI Land Acknowledgement Statement. The University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping ground of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. We honor and respect the enduring and continuing relationship between the Indigenous people and this land by teaching and learning more about their history and present-day communities, and by becoming stewards of the land that we too inherit. Before we begin, I'd like to highlight the Women's Leadership Council, led by a group of alumni volunteers. The URI Women's Leadership Council supports and enhances the personal and professional growth of URI women by cultivating meaningful opportunities to unite, celebrate, empower, and learn from each other while forming lasting connections and relationships in the community and beyond. Now, about today's program. This session will be question and answer style between our featured speaker, Aria Mia Loberti, and our moderator, Elizabeth Werner. As you listen to the program, feel free to submit questions into the Q&A feature, and if time allows, we'll spend some time at the end sharing your questions with Aria. Please note that we may not be able to get to all the questions today. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Elizabeth Werner.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Liz. We are very excited to have the opportunity to visit with and learn about Aria's academic professional journey that has led her to the successful career she has today. Aria Mia Loberti is a proud University of Rhode Island alumna from the class of 2020. She is an actress, writer, human rights advocate, and Fulbright Scholar. She made a stunning debut as Marie-Laure Leblanc in Netflix All the Light We Cannot See, earning a Film Independent Spirit Award nomination and a Rising Star Award at TIFF. She now stars in the Spiderwick Chronicles on Roku, which premiered to record-breaking numbers. Before acting, Loberti was a PhD candidate in ancient rhetoric and earned her master's with a distinction on a Fulbright Scholarship. A passionate advocate, she has spoken at the UN, delivered a TEDx talk, and serves as a UNICEF ambassador, focusing on climate action, gender equity, and education access. She is also an ambassador for Guide Dogs for the Blind, a role once held by Betty White, and the face of L'Occitane in Provence. Aria, it is wonderful to have you here today. I am very excited for our Q&A session, but first, I would love it if you would share a little bit of your story to let our audience get to know you a bit.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet all of you, albeit virtually. It's very snowy in Rhode Island, so I would have been heartbroken if this were in person and then just got moved to Zoom anyway. But it's so good to be with all of you, and I hope you're all having a great afternoon so far. So whenever I get to introduce myself to people, and whenever I am in a group of new people, the thing that I always seem to pinpoint on and talk about the most is actually URI, because I still always say it was maybe the best time of my entire life. It was some of the happiest memories, and that even has to do with, all the incredible things that have happened to me after URI. I still look back at URI as maybe the best part. So thank you so much for having me back, even if I'm not on campus, but hopefully I'll be back there soon. So yeah, I don't know where to begin. I think I'll just start there. I'll start at URI. So when I came in, it was 2016. I was a political science and biology major, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I just took a bunch of classes in my freshman, first semester. And I really latched on to the honors program because of the way it just encapsulated everything I wanted to be a part of. It was that like quintessential prestige, if you will, liberal arts education. It exposed me to so many different things, and having so many incredible professors and honors that came from multifaceted backgrounds allowed me to see that that was a possibility in the curriculum for me. So instead of me being undecided, which I probably should have done in retrospect, I declared 3 majors and 2 minors. One of the minors I designed myself, which I don't recommend. It was a lot of paperwork. And so I just wanted to study everything and anything that I could. And I was really grateful that I had professors and academic advisors who didn't see that as something that would be weak. I definitely had people who told me that, that wasn't maybe the way to do things, that I wouldn't be perceived as serious. But I really applauded the professors who told me that that was, something that would be beneficial, because I think at the end of the day, that's what served me well in my career. I ended up really finding joy in ancient history, and in specifically storytelling in ancient history, and how certain people have been left out of that storytelling and left out of, our mindset, our history, our culture today. And that's what led me to Royal Holloway, University of London, which has an ancient rhetoric program that's maybe like singular in the whole world. It was incredible to get to go. And I went on a Fulbright scholarship, which was something I aspired to since I got to URI. And again, I'll shout out the honors program and the Office of National Fellowships, because they were the people who like helped me actually get to that goal. And when I was at Royal Holloway, here I am in this prestigious program on like one of the most competitive, influential scholarships in the world. And the people around me, the 5 other students who got admitted to that program, were living life. We were in the middle of the pandemic, but they loved everything about it. And I wasn't happy, and I didn't know why. It's so hard when you're like really grateful to also recognize that sometimes you're not happy, you don't feel fulfilled in the way you want to. And then I was already accepted to my PhD. So I moved back to America after being in London for a bit, and was just perpetually like, this is not my path, and I don't know why. And it felt like I was letting down some of my professors in a way, because they were the ones who boosted me up. They were the ones who like saw the potential in me to be a really good academic. And I, at the end of the day, realized that like, this is my journey and it's going to be really weird. And I thought that that meant that I was going to finish my PhD and then run for office. And then I got a call from a teacher I hadn't heard from in a really long time, since I was like 11. And she sent me a casting search. And then 3 weeks later, I got cast in the leading role that had thousands of people audition for it. And yeah, the rest is sort of history, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But that's how things started. So like, whatever you're doing, you don't know where it's going to lead you. Like, it's just, nothing has been linear. So it's been really cool. But thanks to URI, I was set up for, how to handle myself in all these different environments, whether it was academic or in media training, or it's been so helpful.
Wow, what a journey. And I love that you had some paths that you walked down purposely, and then accepted paths that came your way. And I think that URI does put us in a great position to sort of follow those paths. I heard you talk a little bit about a pivotal moment that happened for you at the University of Rhode Island with some of your professors. And I would love it if you could share some of that with us.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think the moment you're referring to is my actual first day of school. So for context, those of you who I may know from school, or who were professors, or whose paths have crossed with me in the past, you will know this. I was homeschooled up until coming to URI from 3rd grade. So I had not been in a classroom of people since I was like 7.5, 8 years old or something. And then I'm like 3rd into like honors freshman biology with thankfully the best professor ever. So it was okay, but I was very scared. And on the first day of school, I just remember being really nervous and sitting in my first class was the biology class. And at this like round table with, my group of students, And we were all nervous. And it was just so nice. That moment of like equalizing that I had never really felt before in my life was really lovely. And then I left that class. And some of those students I'm still in touch with today, which is really cool. But I left that class and I went to another honors class because apparently this is just an advertisement for the honors program. I don't know why. I went to another honors class, which was a communication class that I had really just took because it like fit my schedule and sounded vaguely fun and like a little break after the hard biology stuff. And that was maybe the most eye-opening experience that introduced me to the concept of rhetoric and the history of rhetoric. But one of the things that that professor said to me, and I don't remember the context, but I must have looked terrified the whole time. And I kept asking her questions like before class and after class. And one of the things that the professor said to me, and this is Dr. Kathleen Torrance, if any of you have had her class or know her, she's incredible. And she said to me, you haven't been told that you've mattered before, have you? And I just like, every time I repeat that story, I tear up because she saw something in me that I didn't really recognize when I was exchanging, my concerns about keeping up with the class. And it was very special, as you can say. Like every time I tell the story, I tear up. And so she was one of the reasons why I declared the major in communication, as well as my political science and then later on philosophy degrees. So I was just really grateful for that being the first moment that someone outside of my immediate family had looked at me and been like, you actually matter. Like what you have to do to get that, I wish more young people were told that. Maybe it was sort of a me problem. Maybe it was just my upbringing and my relationship with the world that led that to be such an impactful statement. Maybe not everyone has to be told that, but if you do, I hope people get told that more because that was maybe the thing that helped me the most.
I think that's beautiful. And I think that sometimes hearing something like that from outside of our immediate family circle and friends makes a tremendous difference. And obviously your professor was incredibly astute in seeing what they saw in you, which I think is amazing. What was it that inspired you to apply for the Fulbright Scholarship?
I don't know. It was always one of those things that I had in the back of my head that I wanted to try for. So I went into URI knowing that more than anything, I wanted to study abroad. And I absolutely did not have the money to do that. Like I pieced together my tuition bit by bit. I worked like 40 hours a week. I did not have the money to contribute to study abroad. But two things happened. One, I had a professor who I took like 5 classes with him, Dr. Daniel Carpenter, absolutely fantastic. And I mostly studied with him for ancient Greek. And he was taking a group of students to Rome. And it was because of actually the URI Foundation that I was able to afford to go on that trip. And that really piqued my interest as well, and like doing more study abroad and maybe pursuing my graduate program abroad. So that itch that I already had after I took that, that experience with Dr. Carpenter in Rome, I knew that I would like to do maybe something else. And the only way for me to really make that make sense would be something like the Fulbright that not only pays your tuition, in most cases, not all, not only pays your tuition to study, but also gives you a living stipend and a bit more support than the average just, free tuition program. And I took a long time, again, with honors and the National Fellowships Office to make sure that I found the program that fit me the best. And thankfully it was Royal Holloway. But I also realized that that Fulbright to the UK is impossibly difficult. And I just can't believe that I even got to the interview, let alone that I got the actual scholarship is so insane to me. So I also applied to 27 other graduate programs and fellowships.
Wow.
So I was never married to that being a possibility. And in fact, I had committed to the University of St. Andrews when I had gotten in on a full scholarship. And I was so sure I wasn't going to get anything else that I had already committed there. So I was just always enamored with the idea of studying abroad, specifically in that program, specifically going to England. It always spoke to me. And I think what made me fall in love with the Fulbright in particular and aspire to it so much was it is not only enforcing you being a good academic and a good scholar, but also a good person and a good ambassador for the US and someone who can go in and be a cultural sponge. And I, having never really been to England before, really wanted to learn more about the culture, not just about the program. And that ended up being the saving grace. Also is really good because like apparently 3 months after I moved from England, I would need to do a British accent in front of 30+ million people. Good.
That was the perfect training. Was the education and the experience there what you hoped it would be?
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I think that was why it was so difficult for me to admit that I wasn't happy on an academic path, because it was the absolute dream. I lived next door to a castle. Like I would look out my window and it was forest and castle. I would go to class every day with like the leading scholars in my field, with 5 other students who were like at the top of their game, who came from all sorts of different backgrounds. And I made one of my absolute best friends, well, 2 of my absolute best friends there at the time. And so it was like, it's a place I every day still talk about, like, I want to go back. I want to go have a good experience, that's not a pandemic experience, like a real life experience there that's not lockdown. Because everything about it was so extraordinarily wonderful that it took so much of me to be able to stop and admit that this isn't the path I want to walk down.
It's not easy. It's not an easy decision sometimes, but
Yeah.
while you were then studying for your PhD in ancient rhetoric at Penn State, you talked a little bit about this in introducing yourself. A former teacher of yours sent you the casting search for the role of Marie-Laure. And I would love to hear from you what your initial reaction was and what your thoughts were when you learned about this role.
Yeah, I think my initial reaction was just cool. That's gonna be amazing for someone. Like that's gonna be really cool for that girl. And like, oh, I can't wait to see that movie come out because I really liked the book. Oh, they're really up high. I have copies from all over the world, but it's on my top shelf. I love the book. I love the book so much. And I knew it right away. Like when she sent it to me, I was like, oh, that's gonna be so cool. And I was mostly just excited to see the movie. And I was like, I don't really act. I don't want to say I never aspired to acting, but I always wanted to act, but I never aspired to a career in acting, which I think is 2 very different things. So I didn't like I responded to her and said no, but I didn't like do anything about this until like 2 days later, where I was like, if you're not happy and you're feeling kind of down on yourself and you don't know why you're here and you just moved, across the ocean again and you're still not satisfied and you still feel like something is missing, take an hour and just do it like you like the book. So I took an hour and I did one tape where it was an absolute, I don't know if I can cuss, SHIT show. It was so bad. It was cringy. It was not lit well. I had no makeup on. I had my grandma's like old shirt it was like a 1940s blouse and it was ancient. And so it had pit stains. You can see the pit stains. It was not. And I did one take, which I didn't know that you were maybe supposed to do more than that. Just, I read with myself because I didn't know that you were supposed to have a reader. And I sent it in. And I was like, well, that was fun. And then I went back to kind of being like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And the next day I heard back from the casting director. And so then I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's an opportunity to learn about an industry I know nothing about. Went into the casting director meeting and she was like, you look terrified. Can I answer any questions for you? And I was like, absolutely. What's a casting director? And so she spent an hour with me on Zoom discussing what casting directors were, what producers were, how casting processes worked, how scripts are written, like literally answered all my questions. And I was like, this is so cool. And the fact that she took this time with me. And I was like, that's really sweet. I'll never hear from her again. But I'm so glad I had that experience. And for the next 2.5 weeks, I was on Zoom multiple times a week doing different scenes with people. I got to meet the director who like I don't know if any of you know Night at the Museum or like have seen it, but I was obsessed with that movie as a kid. And the director of All the Light directed the Night at the Museum trilogy. So I'm like starstruck. Also the biggest Stranger Things fan. He also does Stranger Things. Obsessed. So cool. And I was just having the time of my life. And then the next thing I know, it's a Sunday morning and I get a text. And they're like, can you pop on Zoom? Didn't know what it was for. And he told me that I had gotten the role, but I didn't really like, I wasn't like mentally prepared for that. I was just sort of like having a good time. And there, I have to say, like, there was a big part of me through this whole process that was like, I've learned so much about this industry that I knew nothing about. I never like gravitated towards classes about the film industry or even about like PR or anything like that at URI. And here I was exposed to it for the first time. And like, maybe there is a place for me in this industry. And I was thinking more with writing because I've always been a writer and always aspired to write more novels. But I was like, maybe this could be, maybe this is the universe telling me to go down that path. It was not. So
It was. So what did it mean to you when you got that phone call that you were the person selected? You, out of thousands of people who auditioned, it was you.
I think I was just mostly, I don't think I comprehended it at first. I was very, very surprised, to say the least, but I was just, I think I had spent the last like year plus, maybe closer to a year and a half, 2 years, like not feeling great about the path that I was on, regardless of how good it looked on paper and regardless of how hard I had worked to get there. And it felt like so far out of my comfort zone that once I had processed it a little bit, I think that was the first thing to click in my brain, is like this idea of being in front of people and being seen and not the person doing the research and not the person doing the writing was so far outside of my comfort zone that I didn't know how to process it. And I think I look at the thousands and thousands of girls who auditioned for this, and a lot of them were people whose names you would know. And I was like that maybe this was a bad choice. Like maybe they should go with the person who's the expert in this because I'm an expert in something else. So I think that was a lot to deal with. And thankfully I had a really great team behind me to help me get set up to do this and like really get there and enjoy it. And it took me, I think, till the shoot was about 90 days. And I think I think on day 70 before I really felt comfortable and like I knew what to do in my job. So it was a process. And I always kept thinking about those like 3,000-4,000 girls, and not everyone, but a majority of them had either acted or aspired to act in this capacity or were just like straight up like famous people. And that was a lot to have to deal with, the idea of like, this is you. And if you are not confident and comfortable and you're too busy griping about the fact that you don't feel like you deserve this, you are not disrespecting yourself necessarily, but you are actually disrespecting the casting director who spent an hour with you, who you love, the director, the other two casting directors out of the UK, your dialect coach, the producers, this whole team of hundreds of people that I can keep listing. You're disrespecting every single one of them by assuming that you are not right. And it's up to you to like make peace with that. So if you want to feel imposter syndrome, fine, but you have to respect their decision because you would have respected it in any other situation except this. So that was also like a really interesting learning experience.
It's really remarkable. So I've heard you talk a bit about the lack of authentic representation in storytelling about blindness and low vision. And when you received this role and you started thinking about that and what this was going to mean to you and to so many others, what were your thoughts?
Gosh, I think this has become like an increasingly loaded question over the last, in particular, 9 months for me. And I'll get into why specifically that time frame. But yeah, I mean, there had never been any type of like real representation. It's very rare that you see any type of disability representation in Hollywood. Hollywood is very keen on race representation, and they're getting much better with LGBTQ representation, but it's increasing. I think disability rep gets increasingly worse. And so it's this sort of interesting phenomenon where it's a part of diversity that really just isn't respected or appreciated at all. And so to see Netflix taking the leap on someone, especially someone who'd like, there are plenty of people who would have fit the character in terms of low vision or blindness who had professional acting experience. It's not like those people were not out there. Like for them, so for them to take a risk on someone who had never done it was much more significant than taking the risk on someone who fit that particular identity feature. And so I think that was really extraordinary because when when that casting announcement was made, people knew nothing about me. They knew that I had never acted before. They knew nothing. They just knew that this was going to be an authentic representation. And that's something that you haven't really seen on screen, especially in a leading character, but especially like a big Hollywood, big budget thing. And I got all these messages, like thousands, not exaggerating, thousands upon thousands of messages a day in my DMs on social media that were just people telling me about how much this meant to them, or moms. That's what like got me the most, were like moms with little girls done sobbing. Like my kid is gonna grow up and have like an actual role model, which I didn't have. And the reason why I say that this has been so loaded lately is I have recently been able to get contact lenses. And that has not only like, for lack of a better phrase, improved my vision. I hesitate to use the word improve, but for this, I will. Improved my vision to the point where the acuity is a lot better, but I no longer have the light sensitivity that was like the key feature of why I was so low vision. It's also trained my eyes, so when I'm not wearing them, my vision is better. So my relationship with this has completely changed, and I understand and appreciate that like what I was able to do was something I don't think I'm ever going to really be able to do again. And that it's really a little bit frightening. I mean, for those of you who knew me at URI, or knew me in any other capacity who are here, that was such a big part of my identity. And not just because like it's obvious like that you see the world in a different way, but because I was so proud of that. I was so proud of sharing those experiences. And I still have my eye condition, like that's not changing. It can't be like fixed that way. But the reality of my situation is I'm no longer going through the world with that filter. And so I always, there are certain privileges that come with, being someone who, even if I had a guide dog who walks into a room and doesn't look like your stereotype, that comes with privileges, regardless of whether you have a disability or a marginalized identity or whatever. If you can fit in with the norm, like the hegemonic structure, you have privilege. And now I've gotten to the place where I have privilege because I can go in, like we were talking before everybody logged on about how I had to go to the grocery store this morning. White snow that would completely have blinded me months ago. And I just go out without my glasses with nothing, and it's great. And then I go into the grocery store and I can read all the labels and I can see all the way down the aisle. Those are privileges. Those are things I never had before. And I realize that now, as someone who's representing this whole community, my relationship has changed, but it doesn't disregard the authenticity that I brought to that character. If it's something that I should do down the line, I think that lived experience is still like wildly important, but I do think there are so many nuances in acting that come with day-to-day lived experience. This is why you hear about like method actors being so powerful. And it's the same thing with authentic representation, is if you are not like truly embodying that identity every day. And I don't mean putting yourself in a blind hole, because that's not what low vision or blindness is. You can't experience it. The only way you can experience is if you have those differences in your cell at the cellular level. And so I've realized that like my life has become very different. I don't feel comfortable. This is my choice. No one else has made this choice for me. I don't feel comfortable embodying that in my acting anymore, but it has really motivated me to express what I've learned in my writing. And that's always going to be a big part of me and my identity, and it's always going to have shaped me. But I have to also take a step back now and realize that how I see the world now is very different from how I saw the world a year ago. And it's no longer metaphorical. And that is like sometimes very deeply frightening, but also a place where I realize I have a very unique perspective that I can really lift up other people and not only show them that it has been done before, but make space. Because I know people are going to come to me to play these characters, and I only hope that I can open the door for the next person so that authentic representation can keep flowing. And I really, really hope that the next person who has like this big outlet, this big voice in Hollywood media, who may come from this background of being blind or having low vision, will have a completely different perspective than I do, because I think that's what makes this so interesting and rich and unique. And I don't want to be the prevailing voice on this. And it's, you know, it's interesting because it really is that balance of like the personal and the professional, and how like in a way you can't have one without the other. People always ask me like, why does it really matter, the authentic representation part, whether it's for anything, whether it's for disability, LGBTQ, race, anything, why does that matter? And I'm like, well, if you look at it on a really big level, like you cannot have The Rock play 11-year-old Harry Potter going to Hogwarts. We appreciate that that would not make sense. It would be really fun, but it would not make sense. And it's kind of the same thing on a more micro level, why authentic representation matters. You can't necessarily put someone in that position who has never authentically lived it. And it comes down to the cellular level, not just to simulation. And I think that's the difference when you see like a truly heartfelt performance, even if it has nothing to do with this type of marginalized identity that we're talking about, a truly heartfelt acting performance. I look at like someone like Ariana Grande in Wicked, and like you could see it in her soul, how much that meant to her. That comes from some form of authenticity. And it doesn't stop with, you know, marginalized identity. It transcends to something like that too.
Amazing, amazing, remarkable. There are 1,000 things I want to ask about now.
Yeah.
It's always hard to narrow down. What if the younger you had seen that representation, maybe when you were 7 or 8 years old, if you had seen some authentic representation at that age in storytelling, how would that, or would that have changed your trajectory?
I think in two ways. The first, probably more obvious way, is like, I always joke about this, and I don't know if it would be true, but I probably would have wanted to be an actress, like as a job. I would have wanted to do that. I did theater when I was like really, really little, and I loved it. It was great. It was just the type of thing that like, you know, everyone had to be included in, and it was wonderful. And I think I would have tried to do something more competitive or do auditions, or like I would have really wanted to do that. I was classically trained as a ballerina. So I think it would have been very easy for me to see like a transition to focus less on that and maybe more on Broadway. And I think it would have changed maybe my mindset a little bit to the point where maybe I even went to college with that intention. But I also like on the more, I don't know, like on the deeper level, I don't know. I think what would have been really interesting is, you know, we've already sort of discussed the idea that like your identity can sort of change depending on where you are in your life. And that for me has been like much bigger over the last year than it has ever been in my life. But when I was really little, there like obviously when you're little, you're still learning the world. And if you're learning the world and you see it differently, things are much more obvious. And if I had, you know, a TV show, even if it was something that just like the parents could watch, like All the Light is definitely not a kid's show, but if it was something like that, just the parents watch that, or if I had, oh, I'm teetering a line here. If I had the books that I write, minor spoiler alert, accessible to me as a kid, I think socially I would have done a lot better because that would have been normalized. And I think that's like the power of media and why, you know, sometimes I get really mad because my job feels superficial. Like, because ancient history is not superficial at all. And sometimes I like get really like, oh my God, I have to dress up again. And it's like the lipstick that I wear is striding forward that like, sometimes I gripe about that part of things. And I think to myself, like, at the end of the day, people spend time, free time, on art that other people make. Everyone does this, TV, whatever. And they choose to spend their free time on that. And that changes how they think about their life, how they think about other people. And there's a reason why good art matters, whether you're talking about like incredible painters or silly reality TV. Like there's a reason why all of that matters and why we consider it art, even if it sounds really silly. And there's also an art form to actors, like as figures, as opposed to when they're just playing a part. I think there's an art form to that and something that people look for. And I'm like, if that had saturated when I was a little girl, I really think I would have grown up so much more confident. I would have actually had friends before I got to college. Like that was the first time I had friends, because it just would have been normalized. Like seeing someone who experiences the world different than you in any capacity is incredible. But what's more important is reaching the people who have never met someone who might fit that minority population. And I think that's what would have changed the most. And then I don't even know what I would be doing because I would have had friends and that would have been crazy. Maybe I would have not been a good student. I don't know.
It's always interesting to think about how the paths could have changed. Well, I think this leads me into the fact that you have been such an amazing advocate for disability rights, for gender equity, equitable access to education, which I think was a path that you did not receive when you were young.
No,
The
no.
climate crisis. You've used your voice to correct the stigmas and the stereotypes that are associated with blindness and low vision. And I just wonder what events or series events, and I know there were a series because I've listened to a lot of your amazing interviews, what events led you and inspired you to become an advocate for others?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I don't really remember a time when I didn't think that that was something that I should do. And I didn't even really think about it as something that I should do, actually, now that I say that. Um, like I think I was just so young when I realized that like people don't always understand. And as a result of people not understanding, and this is not willful ignorance, this is just straight up ignorance. Like as opposed to people not understanding something about people, society, etc., that can actually cause harm. And it's a very simple thing, but if you think about it, it has like really deep, trench lines in everyday life. Like this idea that you can limit someone's access to something, you can prevent someone from getting a piece of information, and that will then have a negative effect on them, not only intellectually, but physically. And so I think, that also down the line led me to wanting to study rhetoric, because that is kind of what rhetoric is. It's like why words have power and why language matters, and like very broad sense of the words. And so I I always sort of knew like deep down that you can do something even if you're very small. And like the first speech that I gave, my dad, I think, like put me up on a crate because I couldn't like see over the microphone. Like, even though you're very small, you can do things. And, I was like 3 or 4 when I started doing this. And then I realized that like, oh, people's mindsets are changing. They're coming up to me and they're saying that they want to do this, or a lawmaker would reach out and this would take like years of hard work and persistence. Like a lawmaker would finally reach out and say, like, I want to make X change to make education more accessible or equitable in X community in Rhode Island. And so I always knew that was like, you don't have to do a lot, or exert a lot of energy or be especially powerful. You can still make a difference. And so that always led me to want to do something. And I'm very grateful that like prior to all of this happening, because I love to pretend that we exist in a meritocracy, that prior to all of this happening, I like was able to get to the UN on my own, like through, study and putting myself in the right places and making change in my local community. That's what got me to the UN. And so I'm glad that I was able to accomplish that before like someone can be like, oh, she's only there because she's an actress. I don't know why I'm so insecure about that, but I am. And one of the most beautiful things that has blossomed out of this, new trajectory in my career has been the UNICEF ambassadorship. And I've been so incredibly grateful to be a part of that because I always wanted to be involved with UNICEF. When I went to the UN, they were never there or they ditched me. So now I get to be involved with them. And I've gotten to travel to incredible places and meet with lots of other young people who, who are really making change in their society. And I think I've always wanted to do climate advocacy and have never really found my in. And that intersection of climate education and the children who are impacted so deeply by the climate crisis that they cannot receive their education or that their education is limited, has been something that I've really been excited to be a part of. But even more profoundly, very recently, I've been doing a lot with UNICEF and the newly reauthorized, as of last month, READ Act, which passed through US Congress prior to the current administration that was able to get through. And I'm just so excited that that act will solidify the importance of every child having access to literacy training, to media literacy as well, and just to a solid education, regardless of their background, their economic status in the US. It's been such a privilege to be able to be lifted up by an organization like UNICEF and to be able to get into rooms that I either never would have been able to get into, or I would have had to fight my butt off to even attempt to unlock the doors. So I'm very grateful to them.
Amazing. And you've lifted them up as well, by the way. You participating. What advice can you give others in taking their lived experiences, good or bad, or in between, and turning them into fuel to help effectuate change?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think the hardest thing is oftentimes the lived experience that you have that's going to impact people the most or give you the most, unique voice is often the thing that you don't actually want to deal with, like you don't want to talk about. And I think that's been really, really hard and really unique and interesting for me because it wasn't necessarily about, I think maybe when I say that people would assume it has to do with like low vision or something, and it doesn't. It has more to do with like the confidence of being able to put myself in front of people. And like that sort of anxiety, like definitely my like mental health has been the hardest thing to have to overcome and talk about. But I think the most important thing to why I'm able to get where I am, because at the end of the day, it's always been about not being afraid of being seen. And that's my perspective in this. And I think everyone has that one thing that they're really struggling with. And, I think right now mine is appreciating that, the way I see the world has astronomically changed. I still have my eye condition. I'm still very much part of the blindness, low vision community, but I no longer go through the world the same way I did when I had like when I was more profoundly low vision. I definitely fit into that category much differently. It's not impacting my day-to-day life anymore. And that's been a real, real struggle. And it's been something that's been incredibly hard for me to talk about and that I've only started talking about in public in like November. So I would suggest, if you want to really make change, whether it's for a particular group of people or for a particular cause that might be more intersectional, that it's so important, and even though it sucks, it's really uncomfortable to stop and introspect and figure out why that particular thing lights your fire. Because if you do, chances are you're going to find something that makes you really uncomfortable. And that is the place where you have to start. And so for me, it started with the perception of being seen. Once I became comfortable being seen and being heard as a little girl, I was able to make change in terms of advocacy. Once I was comfortable being seen and being heard as an adult, I was able to, be really comfortable in these settings that this industry puts me in, which, again, if you knew me in college, it was ripped jeans, Doc Martens, and like an ancient Argyle sweater. Like it was everything I could do to like not be like standing out in the crowd of people on the quad. And then you just throw like the big black guide dog, and that it was everything I could do to like sort of like tip that scale. So like negate the fact that there was a 70-pound dog. And so I'm like, to be able to go from that to being, you know, a frame that's from like chin to eyebrow with like sobbing, be on a 90-foot tall screen in the middle of Times Square has been impossibly hard. And I think because I've been able to actually be vulnerable, and understand that I can keep things personal, that has allowed me to make that change. And I really think that the more you put yourself out there, you don't know what will happen, but it starts with looking inside at the things that make you really uncomfortable first, and having to realize that you are going to be uncomfortable for a little while, but that's what's going to lead to change for yourself and then for other people.
What do you think it was that gave you the courage to be able to do that? What transition or what event happened, or did it evolve over time to give you that courage to open up about these really vulnerable places inside?
I think it happened, gosh, I think a lot of it was actually like so stupid, because I don't want this to be like an advertisement. I would love to like not keep doing this. It's not just because I'm here with all of you. It's like genuinely like the 4 years at URI.
Mhm.
That was it, because that was the first time that I was like engaging with people who were my own age in a classroom setting, but also with like lots of different people. Um, and you know, we always talk about like diversity as being like important, but it's not just diversity in the way that we tend to think about it now as like the token word, but it's like just being with other people who don't think like you matters so much. And being able to go to a professor's office and admit that like I was struggling with something, or I wanted extra help, even if I didn't like, even if I was getting an A and I felt insecure about the A that I was getting, like going to the office and being like, can you walk me through this again? Like, can we go through the homework? And like just being able to like admit that, and admit that I like wasn't always comfortable, like that I could be wrong, that I wasn't right sometimes, that I had a different perspective, and that that wasn't good or bad. That was what set me up, I think, to be emotionally healthy going into this, because it is an extra, like it's already an extremely vulnerable industry. Like you have to put yourself out there more so than I think other professions. Like professionalism is a little blurrier, and it's difficult. And so I think being able to have done that was really wonderful. And I learned equally from maybe the 2 or 3 professors who didn't have as open a door and weren't as mindful. Like I learned just as much from them. And having that experience set me up. I thought it was setting me up for grad school. It did not. But I think more than anything, it set me up to be a good person and to be a very good listener. Because sometimes I, as a student, wasn't the best listener. Like I was good at like doing really well on tests, but I wasn't always listening to social cues as well as I could have. And I think that's been a huge thing that I learned because I went to URI. And yeah, it's been incredible and really wonderful. And so I would suggest that, you know, find that group of people, find your good friend, and also find a good therapist if these are things that you're struggling with.
Right. And knock on that professor's door. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, don't be afraid. They're usually nice. 99% of them will
right.
not kill you.
Exactly. What do you
The
think
others are in Donna Tartt novels.
What do you think about answering some questions from people that joined us today? Can we do that?
That'll be awesome. Yeah.
Let me hit my little magic button here. All right, let's see here. So I so enjoyed your acting and enlightenment of vision challenges so uniquely presented in this character. I've enjoyed following a WSL series called Astrid. Sarah Mortensen plays the character with the neurodifferent autism persona. It's amazing. She is method acting only. Would you feel method actors can learn such talent without authentic life experience?
I mean, I'm not fully method. I use some method acting when I prep. And I think that it is incredibly helpful for historical work, which is kind of the thing that I want to do the most. And one of the characters for me that I'm working on right now is which will hopefully like film this year, I don't know, is like my dream role, and it is a historical real person that I cannot talk about her name. And I think for stuff like that, that is absolutely quintessential, is like figuring out a place that you can go that won't affect your day-to-day life, that you can like really fall into, and then figure out how to make set a safe and comfortable space if you want to engage in anything that's like quasi method or method. I think for I don't know about I don't want to say I don't know anything about neurodiversity. I don't know as much about neurodiversity. I don't know, like that's not my place to go answer that question. But I think if we're talking about something physical, so like low vision, blindness, deafness, hard of hearing, maybe a limb difference. Again, I'm gonna point to Wicked because I think it was really fun and I saw it recently. You know, a wheelchair user, whatever. I think those are the types of things that you can get a really good, really educated facsimile of a physical difference, but what you can't get is nuance. So one of the like cool experiences that I remember talking about with the director of All the Light. Oh, I'm sorry, no, of Spiderwick actually, who worked with the actor who played Daredevil. Charlie, cannot remember his last name. Someone at me, it's fine. He's lovely. But who portrays Daredevil. So Daredevil is supposed to be totally blind, but he has like extra senses that are like sort of supernatural. Charlie is sighted. And this director worked with him and also worked with me, going in and bringing in like the lived experience of perhaps not being blind, but being low vision. I'm playing a character who's blind, but has supernatural abilities that make her, quote unquote, not blind. And so she had both of those experiences. And one of the things we talked about was something as simple as knowing that, you know, even if you were like super method and like doing all your research, and he was incredible at doing his research, he was amazing. Like spending time with lots of people, like really observing them and the fine details, that you're not necessarily going to get the appropriate mannerisms and mechanisms because you're still in your own processing, your own awareness of what it might mean to have that physical difference. So something as simple as like going like to the back of a table, pretend this is the table, and like instead of like most people in movies who are playing a blind person would do this and like grope the table. But what you would actually do is this, because you don't want to hurt the inside of your hand. You want to protect your hand. So you're going to go with your knuckles, which are easy to protect. Like something like that. You could observe everyone you want, but you are not going to know when to make that choice unless you've actually lived it. So I do think, yes, you can have really good storytelling with someone who's, quote, inauthentic. When it comes to physical differences, you can, but it might not be the best representation of what that character could be. And that's why it's important to have, I think, diversity in the hiring process. That said, like I've mentioned before, like I have made the conscious choice, I myself have made this choice to no longer pursue portraying blind or low vision characters because of the recent changes and developments I've had with my contact lenses. I could still 100% bring all of that lived experience. I have so much, like I have like 29 years of it that I could bring, but I choose not to, because not only do I want to open the door for other people, I also realize that the mannerisms I have day to day have really changed. So I want to make sure that that is as full and honest as possible without me having to imitate anyone, because I do think acting, there's a lot of imitation obviously in it, there's a lot of falsity in it, but at the end of the day, again, there's a reason why, you know, The Rock does not play Eloise at the Plaza. There's a reason.
That's a frightening thought.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Let's see. I'll ask you another one. Did your eyesight lead you to being homeschooled?
Yeah, it did. So, very, very, very long story short. My mom is here, and if you want to, I don't know if you can like at her in the comments, but she could tell you the whole story. But long story short is the teachers in the public school were incredibly discriminatory. definitely abusive in different ways. It was not a great experience for me mentally and intellectually, obviously, as a young student. And so when I was in 3rd grade, I got pulled out, and there was a huge legal battle, and that resulted in me being homeschooled, because the course of action was basically, in order for me to get my free and appropriate public education, emphasis on appropriate, I needed to be able to do that at home. That was a blessing because, like I had mentioned before, I was classically trained as a ballerina, so it allowed me to really devote more time to studying that art form, which, if you know anything about it, is incredibly time consuming. And a lot of people who want to focus on ballet are also like homeschooled for that reason. But so that was just a happy coincidence that it allowed me to like have that freedom. But even more importantly, it allowed me to pursue my education at a really advanced rate. So I was able to do like honors classes and like crazy subjects that I couldn't have done in school, because I was doing it with an online curriculum. And so it was very beneficial besides my vision. And at the end of the day, I'm like grateful that I really got to do it, even though it was socially very, very different, not socially isolating, but socially very different. So being able to go to URI was like a saving grace at the end. It was really wonderful.
I love that. All right, let's see here. Hi, as an ambassador for UNICEF, your thoughts about what is happening currently with the USA?
Oh, wow. It's hard to separate my professional work sometimes from my personal feelings. And I think what has been most important for me in the last 3 weeks, has it only been 3 weeks? Yes, in the last 3 weeks has been for, me to appreciate that I'm in a really great position where I can use my voice to make change, and that there are incredible NGOs and nonprofit organizations and places that do not receive any government funding that still can do a lot of incredible work. And it's really important, regardless of what political situation and regardless, of where federal funding is going. It's really important for all of us to recognize the work that these incredible organizations do. And I hope that right now, maybe we can shed some more light on them. Maybe we can increase their funds. Maybe we can really like bolster the work that they're doing. Because obviously UNICEF receives government funding, and I'm specifically a UNICEF USA ambassador. So there's a lot of like federal budgeting and things involved in that position. And I think, but I also think back to a lot of the foundations and organizations that I'm affiliated with that are also doing incredible work that receive absolutely none, whether or not the federal government would give it to them. And I think it's an incredible opportunity for us all to maybe look up some of those organizations and see how we can support their work for causes that matter to us. And also to, not lose hope and not lose connection with each other, and to never shut anyone down because of their political views. That's maybe the scariest part of what's going on right now.
So perfect. I wish that we had more time. I cannot believe that it's already 1 o'clock. I went over a little bit. I'm so sorry. I could spend hours with you. I have a million more questions. We're going to have to do this again, but I think Liz, are you going to pop back in, I think?
I am. I don't know if you can see me or not.
No, not yet.
Here we go. I'm starting my video. Can you see me now?
Yes.
So thank you so much, Aria and Elizabeth. And Aria, your transparency, I'm just blown away. And we are privileged to hear your story. And Elizabeth, thanks. I know how busy you are, for all your time and your great questions and helping her bring her story to us all. For those of you who joined today for the webinar, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. And you will be receiving in the next few days a brief survey. If you could take some time just to fill that out, we'd appreciate it, because that's how we decide how we're going to move forward with the speaker series. And we'd like to bring you more in this Women's in Leadership speaker series. So I'd like to give the final word to Aria. Do you have any closing thoughts or messages you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I'm just really grateful to everyone for your time, and I would like to say another really big thank you to everyone. Like scrolling through, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to get nervous, but now I'm like scrolling through the participant names, and I recognize a lot of you. And I really miss you guys. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm hoping that I will be back on campus hopefully in the spring. And so I would love to see some folks, and it would be just really great to connect with people. But I also want to say a thank you to the URI Foundation and to the Women's Leadership Council, because I was actually a scholarship recipient um for both. And without those scholarships, I would not have been able to go to school. So I am just really grateful that not only like, I was able to get my education and have, people believe in me to fund it partially, but also that I can be here and, hopefully someday I'll be able to like actually give real money to URI and like support someone else's education, even if it's in a really small way. So I hope that like if I can continue to be successful, that will allow me to, get to that point. But what I really think is wonderful is that this is a way that I can support for now. And I am really grateful for all of you for joining in something like this and building up that community, because I think I know the budgeters and the deans would not agree with me, but I do think the community is just as important sometimes as the financial benefit of college. So I'm like, thank you so much. And time is currency. So I really appreciate that you spent time with me. And I thank everyone for supporting me from when I walked in 2016 when I was really nervous all the way to now.